I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, we're welcoming back one of my favorite guests, James Maiwurm. He is here to discuss his thought-provoking novel, Inheritance of Crises and Dysfunction, which tackles global political crises alongside deeply personal struggles. With a remarkable background as chairman emeritus of a leading global law firm and a lifetime of relevant experience, James weaves together an intriguing narrative that delves into the complex issues of our time. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight. We thank the team at Prime 7 Media for helping us put him in the spotlight today, and we ask viewers like you to support authors like him by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing his amazing book. The links are below this interview. James, great to see you here today on Spotlight.
Well, I'm really glad to be back, Logan. Good to see you, and glad to be able to chat with your audience.
It's great to have you on the show as always. And let's talk a little bit about in writing a novel that balances both global political crises and deeply personal struggles, such as loss and retirement. Tell us why you decided to blend the two and how they fit together.
That's a good multifaceted question. You hit the jackpot. This book was really born back at the end of 1999 as the COVID crisis began to ramp up. And the COVID crisis came at a time when it was vast enough in terms of its coverage that it really was depressing. And you're worried about what was going to happen. Were we able to get things turned around, and how bad would it be? And I was trained to be respectful of vaccines because my mother was a nurse in World War II in the South Pacific. And she used to talk about, if we'd had all these drugs back then, we would have saved a lot of our men and women. And so that just always stuck with me as something to keep in mind. So when people were resisting the COVID vaccine, it seemed to me like we needed a little pushback and say, look, these vaccines are modern miracles, and they're not perfect, but there's a lot about them. And so part of it was a pushback against what some people thought was interference with their right to decide things. So I grew up in the middle of nowhere. I'm sort of a nobody from nowhere in a very small town in Ohio. And I went back for my class reunion a couple of months ago, and those of us who were left, and we talked a little bit about vaccines, and we talked about, and that's why I ended up dealing with it in the book, because people resist change in general, and they also resist being told what to do. And I talked to some of my friends who were not in favor of the COVID vaccine. I said, "What are you thinking?" Where I grew up, we had a lot of polio. How can you think about not doing something about a vaccine that's as bad as this is in terms of spontaneous growth? And they said, we just don't like being told what to do. And if you understand the Midwest mentality, and I'm guilty of having that to some extent, you understand that people don't want the government in their back pockets, in their bedroom, or even in the arm when they're about to get a shot. And so you have to, so I think understanding where people are coming from helps you understand where they're going, why they resist, why they promote. And I think it's a good lesson. And so part of it was my reaction to COVID and my reaction to some of the things that happened in response, which were really hard to believe. Or, well, maybe put it better, hard to understand. Hard to believe is one thing, hard to understand is another. And so part of it was trying to deal with the COVID crisis mentally. And at the same time, we're dealing with economic hardship that was growing, and that was worrying. And, one of the things that all of us around the world want to do is leave our kids better off than we were. And I grew up, we didn't live lavishly, but we did well. But, trying to get today's children into a stream of an arc, I guess an arc, that gets them to where you want them to be is hard these days. And today, for example, kids in their 20s and 30s have a real hard time affording housing. And so that's going to be a problem for some period of time. But so some of the resistance to the economic news and the economic policies reflect the fact, again, where are people coming from? They're coming from a place that involves a lot of inflation by some standards. It involves a difficulty, buying a home. It involves difficulty doing some other things that they would like to do. And so what I was looking at is all of these, and then of course there's Ukraine. What could you what else to say about what a dangerous, disastrous situation that is. And so you pile all of these things up, and you thought, wow, that's interesting. And then you go to our politics, and I'm about done here. I'll shut off the
no worries,
the train of thought here. But when you think about what's going on in the world from a political standpoint, whether you're looking at Russia, changes in Poland, things going on in Turkey, all of these things are troublesome also. And so you worry a little bit about what's going to happen and what's going to be the impact. And then you add on to that, and this gets into where the book really kind of starts coming from. With all of this going on over some period of time, with various speeds, various levels of crisis, but the world is full of crisis and dysfunction. That's a name of a book that's probably too long, but it's descriptive. And it's interesting that hasn't gone away. Today we have a different level of crisis and dysfunction than we had 4 years ago, but it's not different in kind. It's different in its outflow and its input on people. But it's not fundamentally different than what it has been in other days. And so I can just remember thinking, before I stop doing whatever I end up doing in retirement, I want to write something down for my own benefit, if not somebody else's, because I want people to think as they get ready to push that voting booth button in a couple of weeks. I want them to think about what's good, bad, or ugly about what's going on. And what they think is going to be different than what I think in many cases. But as long as they think, they try to take into account all of the various factors that come into play and understand that it's a difficult situation. And then you also, from our standpoint, you have to, I think, also look at people where they're coming from. And where they're coming from and their fears and their concerns get reflected in what happens on a day-to-day basis. Yeah. And so all of that stuff sort of forced me into thinking I would write the book. I quit once. I threw it in the closet and said, "Yeah, I'm not going to deal with it." Right. But I got back to it, and I'm really happy that it's going to be available more publicly now.
Yeah, well, we're glad you did keep on working on the book. I think what's unique about our times is a relatively new phenomenon, and that's distrust of the media. I mean, I can't think of a time in modern history where journalists have been less trusted. I think, Walter Cronkite, David Brinkley, and that ilk tried their best to give you the crossroads of America to their as honest as they could be. Today, you have advocacy journalism with Fox on the left, CNN, MSNBC, and everybody else on the right. I think I mixed it up. Fox on the right and MSNBC on the left. And people don't know what to believe. All they hear is partisan viewpoints, right?
Isn't that a remarkable development? That's a very good point. It's a point that I think affects us in significant ways on a day-to-day basis. Because if you've got people out there whose opinions are being formed by advocates as opposed to information givers. Those are much different functions. And the advocates are strong, and the vigor and the sharp angles that are used today in delivering the news and talking about the news is really unfortunate, because it's hard. We always used to have trouble on Thanksgiving with Uncle Bob, because there was always going to be somebody who sort of stood out at the edge of the Thanksgiving table, and you sort of let him go. Well, now we've got lots of people who are Uncle Bob's getting in trouble, and it's really a terrible phenomenon. And when you think about the pressure on the news media, I'm sure you see it much more than I do. It's really remarkable.
Yeah. Yeah, it just seems like they're pro this candidate or pro that candidate rather than giving you the facts. And it's unfair because, they're talk show hosts nowadays. They're not journalists. And a lot is lost when you don't have journalists, like you say, being fact givers. Let's talk a little bit about the character of Salt Pepper. What was the inspiration behind him? Is he inspired by real life people or a combination of personal experiences? Tell us a little bit about your protagonist.
The protagonist, Salt Pepper, came from a variety of sources, but some of it was my Midwest bringing up. Some of it was experience that I have had overseas in my law practice and in my days of trying to run a law firm, which is a book in and of itself. So you've got all of these factors coming in, and Salt Pepper sort of personifies, I think, what I was trying to do was use him as a fulcrum of sorts to try to get the varying information slices, around him, in him, on him, and sort of watch how he takes it. And he's supposed to be an honest broker in this book, and an honest broker is somebody in this context who listens, who thinks, and who does what he thinks is the right thing, regardless of the personal consequence. But the key thing here, I think, is listening and not yelling, and thinking and not going blank. And if somebody could say to me, your book was interesting, I didn't like it very much, but it made me think about something. That's a win. I'll take a win.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not trying to win the World Series here. I'd like to, if I could change 5 votes, that would be okay, because I still remember what happened after the last presidential election, when people were saying, well, if I could get 11,000 votes here, 11,000 votes there, we could turn this thing around. Well, we're not in the business of manufacturing false votes or false information. That's not what our country's about. And I used to hear, like 3 or 4 months ago, well, more like even 3 or 4 years ago, people started talking about the potential loss of our democracy, the American democracy. And I initially thought, that can't be. That's craziness. Things are bad, but they're not that bad. Well, about the first quarter of last year, I came around to the view that maybe they were right, and that was also sort of an austere manner of thinking about the need for lots of response, listening, talking, and trying to bring people along into what I call the middle. Not exactly exciting, but concept, and it's not new. But if we could just get everybody in the middle, and if you think of it as a football field, and you just got everybody from the 20-yard line, into the 35-yard line, that would be enough to change our world, because there's probably 800 precincts in the country that are going to make a difference in the presidential election. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But so the book, one of the things the book does, for example, in connection with that, is we go into a little bit of an explanation of what happened at the time of the Constitution's formation, why we have this college electoral system, And so the book talks a little bit about that, not to be cute or non-interesting, but because it's part of the background, the firmament that some things in the Constitution, which are not such hot ideas, got in there for reasons that were, akin to what was going on around those people at that time.
Yeah. It's interesting for generations, of course, there was election day and everybody just voted for the candidate of his or her choice. Since COVID, it's been different because now you have a lot of mail-in balloting, which is a game changer, of course. Um, I feel, and perhaps you do too, there needs to be some uniformity and some assurances of authenticity when it comes to mail-in ballots, paper ballots, harvested ballots, dropped-off ballots, when you don't actually have a person going into the voting booth, clicking the
Right.
levers and pulling the handle, you know?
I think the magic word there was what you said. You said it was harvested.
Yeah.
There were some of that I think in North Carolina after the last election, and that's just not tolerable.
Yeah.
We have to have a way to make our votes bulletproof,
Yeah.
and that has to take place at the local level because I don't think we're going to nationalize
Right.
the way we do voting because it's too there's too much lack of uniformity anyway. There's too many kinds of issues.
Mm-hmm.
But it sure is. There are strange things in the Constitution. There are strange things in our voting history. There are strange things in the Electoral College, and there are reasons for that. But you
Mm-hmm.
have to live with them and not let them get you down. But there are quirky things in there that are troublesome.
Yeah. Yeah, it
Not the way you'd
certainly is
write
a
it today.
system that needs to be improved. Like you said, it is a state level process, county level process, city state level process in many cases. And there's so many different rules, and harvesting seems like it's, a wrong concept if people don't care enough or perhaps even have the mental capacity to vote. Um, they shouldn't be voting. They shouldn't be going
Right.
around getting all the grandmas at the nursing home collecting their ballots. And
Yeah.
maybe grandma and grandpa don't know what they're putting on that ballot. So it's something that needs to be addressed for sure. Let's turn back to Salt for a little bit and his personal issues and the personal turmoil he faces. He's lost his spouse. He has emotions concerning his retirement. Tell us a little bit about how you approach writing his emotional journey and what you hope readers take away from it.
Okay, so first of all, I guess I should ask myself the question and answer it. Why did you do that? And what I was trying to do in the book, in my own awkward way, I guess, is put together pieces of influence that affected people's day-to-day thinking and life. And for one, there's the guy who runs the men's store in the downtown of this little town. There's the barber shop, which I can remember as a kid was a place where if you got a haircut in about 3 hours of lecturing from from the barber. But really, what I was trying to do was paint a picture, and it has to be done quickly in a book like this because you could end up with 10 volumes if you went too far. But I wanted to be able to illustrate factors that influenced people's thinking, voting, and their day-to-day living. Tariffs affect our agricultural part of the economy. Wage and hour issues affect almost everybody. You got inflation, which has hasn't gone. Maybe it's going to sink down a little bit here. Let's hope. But so there are all of these factors, and the reason Salt is there is to sort of take the brunt of, to some extent, but also to explain and react to people who he knows fundamentally from his background and youth in this area, but which has changed a lot. And so what he has to do is understand the change, try to help smooths things over where the rough spots are, and explain to the reader why the tariffs, why the international reaction to our system of government and some of our politicians is a bad thing for us all. So it's part of a segment setting of what's going on and why. Yeah. And that's what I was trying. I wasn't trying to write a long set of multi-volume book on life in small towns today, or life on the farm, or life at the gas station, or life on the steel mill floor. But all of those things are important elements of our economy and our culture. It goes fundamentally to, I think, what Americans expect, and I think what everybody around the world expects or hopes for, and that is a fair treatment. They want an honest buck for an honest day's work. Yeah. They want to have the right to vote. They don't want to be bothered by the government sticking their nose into their bedroom or into other things. And so Salt was sort of a guy who got hit by these things, thought about them, and then reacted and illustrated, in some cases, one of many potential softeners to the impacts that are being had. So he was at one time. So he's at once a collector of data, so he can listen and think and understand where the other side is coming from. And on the other hand, he's somebody who wants to be a doer and push things along. And you don't often, I guess, in this world get both in one package. But the book was long enough, and so we sort of scrunched it in. But that was the reason. There was a reason for it.
Yeah, absolutely. We historically have lived in a nation known for rugged individualism. Salt is that guy, don't you think? And I think America is still a land of rugged individuals, don't you think?
I do, and I think we want to keep it that way within limits. I mean, I don't, the guys who were on the Capitol steps on January 6th, they were rugged individualists, but that's a little extreme.
Right.
But I do think you want, in the world, we have lots of followers. What we want people to do is think about what that implies and how messy that can get. And if we had followers in the sense of people who would think about it and try to do the right thing and grab a few people to bring them along, that would be a good thing. So we need, it's hard to have followers without having leaders. And leaders are sometimes in short supply. And leaders who have integrity and sense to them and are worried about the right things on a day-to-day basis, those are even in further short supply.
Exactly. Rarities, as a matter of fact.
Maybe we can. Maybe what we need is a new baby boon of thinkers. Maybe it's a good thing we're having. You sell these books at book fairs. Who do you want to be thinking about these issues? It's people who read books.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Tell us how your background, your impressive background as chairman emeritus of a global law firm and other positions as well, have influenced the themes and the narratives in your book.
Well, that's a good question. Thank you. They've had a dramatic impact because as I said earlier, I grew up in the middle of nowhere. My wife, we got married after college, but she grew up from the same nowhere. She was much smarter and impressive than I am, but she's a social worker, and so she picks up things in a positive way. But I think the impact of Salt was dramatic in my mind because I did need this vehicle to sort of pull people in and through the various issues. And I think Salt was a character with a purpose. The book has a mission and it has a message. And there was an extent to which Salt was the determiner of the mission and the message, and also the giver of the message. And he showed some leadership, and he ended up doing things that were somewhat unique and probably not very practical. But again, we were illustrating concepts and made people think. If people would just think for 2 pages and smile once, that's a win. In my world, in that book, it didn't have a purpose to make everybody happy. It had a purpose of a little bit of education, a little bit of fun, and a little bit of interest. And he was intended to be somebody who thought about things, tried to be fair, and he was going through this post loss of his wife, which I think would affect anybody. I think whenever you suffer a death in the family like that, you're going to feel it, and it has an impact. And the question is, what are you going to do with it? If you're on the receiving end, and my wife, who was a grief counselor for years and years, who could tell you better about this than I can, but that impact is dramatic, and you have to recognize that people like that are under a lot of stress. And putting him in a high challenging position was a risk, and somebody decided to bet on him, and they bet on him because he had judgment. Not because he was running around burning things.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you see the role of literature in discussing and dissecting contemporary global issues?
I've actually thought a little bit about that. And one of the things I decided not to do was try to go too far. I hate to say it, but I'm not Bob Woodward. And I'm not Cronkite, and I'm not Eric Sevareid, or all those people that now we're beyond anybody who's in the room who still remembers them. But I just think all of that which is going on internationally is I think it's tremendously stressful if you can actually get yourself let yourself get down about it, and that's why I think it's important to do something. And that was sort of what I was trying to do, was get some relief in the form of saying, well, at least I've tried to bring people along a path and not force them into any particular vein, but try to get them into a position where they're thinking about things and recognizing that there are things they can do. And Salt is not an ordinary person, but he's not extraordinary either. But he's trusted. He's smart and he's trusted. And smart and trusted and having good judgment is a pretty good set of skills. And trying to illustrate that was another part of what was going on. So the book is really pretty multifaceted. I mean, if you try to diagram the book, it takes you all over a piece of paper. But we had a lot of goals. We were maybe too ambitious, but I felt like it was important. I had some things I wanted to say, I wanted people to do, and I wanted people to think. And I recognize I'm not going to accomplish great things in the world, but all I want to do is get people thinking. And,
Absolutely. And I think Salt is a wonderful character. He's a retired professional drawn back into a clandestine role. Tell us why you feel his reemergence after retiring, when people are thinking about, just focusing on their own life and the years they have left, he decided to take an active stance.
Well, part of it there's several reasons I think why he decided to be active. One is that he lost his wife, and he was looking for something to fill up what he was ultimately concerned about in terms of having empty space in his life. And that was exacerbated by the fact that he moved from a condo in the Georgetown area of D.C., which is not exactly a laid-back place. He moved out to this farm at the foot of the mountains.
Yeah, the Blue Ridge Mountains, right?
And the Blue Ridge Mountains, and in January. And this isn't Alaska, but it's not Hawaii either. And so January, at the foot of the Blue Mountains, in January is not a pleasant place to be. And so, well, I guess it depends on what you want. But so he was really, he was being assaulted, and then he was being assaulted on a day-to-day basis. And I made a lot out about the moving boxes, but the moving boxes sort of personify, if you can think about it that way, personify the burdens that are in the way. Because the damn moving boxes are just things that keep coming back. They don't go away. You have to deal with them. And it's a lot like this grief and the other things that are affecting him. And, part of it is some of that coming together. And then I guess the way I think about it, and there's a little bit of a personal touch on this one, is, you want, again, to have a positive impact, but you realize that when you're thrust into leadership, like Salt was, and Salt was not a volunteer, he got dragged. But when you're in that position, you every once in a while you have to stand up and remember that in some senses you're out there naked, and you're gonna scratch and fight for people trying to come around to a rational way of thinking about tough issues.
Yeah.
And I think about people just think you're nuts.
Yeah.
Well, real people don't think you're nuts. And, consistent with what you said earlier, my experience is that people around the world are almost all fundamentally similar. And that goes from the cab driver in Hong Kong who 15 years ago spoke English. Sorry about that.
Oh, no worries.
15 years ago spoke English and today speaks Chinese.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you worry about, well, I'm trying to illustrate, trying to illustrate the fact that, I've been to Poland, I've been to Russia, although when you've been to Russia, it's not like you've been there and had, it's an opaque place. But Australia, China, Canada, not so much South America, but fundamentally, if you get beyond the surface, people are all the same. They're rational for the most. Now, guys who are going off trying to shoot Trump are not rational, but
right.
That's a real embarrassment. But it's terrible.
Yeah.
But the people who I have met around the world are very similar. And once you get beyond a certain, a little bit deeper into, not fully into the core, but at least out, into the surface. Yeah. And I think it's remarkable. I mean, I was always surprised, and if you look at what's going on around the world right now, let's take Germany as an example. And I'm not an expert on German, even though my last name is German. I guess if you put it nicely, you could call that German. The German people have a coalition government, and so they don't have 2 or 3 parties; they got like 20 parties, and so it's even hard to round up all of the cattle when they go to the vote. But they just took a swing to the right on the political scale. And that's interesting because you need to see how that fits into the swell of history, because for a long time, Germany was concerned about its history, and one of the things I learned relatively early on, for example, is the Europeans have a real passion for privacy. They are ultra conservative about maintaining privacy. Well, the reason for that is, at least in significant part, that Hitler used access to public data to carry out some of what he was doing. uh, before the war broke out. And so people in Europe remember that, even though most of them didn't experience it firsthand. But that's a fundamental thing that you need to understand about Europeans, and they're all great people. There's nothing negative about that. But what we're trying to say is, I get where they're coming from.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what they think is reasonable, what I think is reasonable is going to be different, because we are from different backgrounds and different. Berlin couldn't be further apart from the town where I grew up. It's really about it. But fundamentally, I grew up in a small that town was so small we had a hitching post. So the Amish used to drive in
Yeah.
and do their weekly grocery shopping in the black buggy, and so they're German too by background. It's a little bit different flavor.
Yeah. Absolutely. I agree. We're different in many ways, but the common things that people want, security, the best for their family, doing better than the next generation, I think those are common themes you'll find among people of every race, every creed, every ethnicity around the world, without a doubt. This book, folks, is just sensational. It is called Inheritance of Crises and Dysfunction. It tackles global political crises alongside deeply personal struggles. With a remarkable background as chairman emeritus of a leading global law firm and a lifetime of experience, James weaves together a narrative that you will find absolutely intriguing. James, thanks so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Thank you, sir, and thanks to all your friends.
I appreciate your time. And to the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time until next time on Spotlight.